hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for another amazing In-House Connect event. I am Kate Bridle, your IHC host. For those of you who have been with us a lot, you know me by now, but in case it's your first time, happy to have you here. Thank you so much for spending your breakfast, lunchtime, dinner, whatever time of day it may be with us. And special thanks to our wonderful sponsor, Semize, thanks to whom this is a free CLE that we get to offer to all of you. It's amazing. It's only possible because of our amazing sponsors. And thank you to our fantastic presenters today, Rebecca, Giovanna, Carly, and Sarah, who are going to teach us about elevating legal's impact in your organization. But before I hand things over, please let me know that you can see me and hear me by popping into the chat. Let me know where you're from. Feel free to pop a little bio about yourself in there and a LinkedIn link as well, just so I know. Thank you, Ricardo. I can see that you were in San Antonio. We've got Arkansas. Fantastic. Ooh, rainy in Arkansas. That sounds nice. I love rain. So if you can believe it, this is our 93rd event of the year. And I want to know if you are here with us for the first time or if you are frequent flyers. As I said, today's webinar is about elevating legal's impact. Rebecca Wood, the head of content at Semize, is going to be emceeing here for us. So I will hand things over to Rebecca to get us started. So Rebecca, take it away.
Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you for such a upbeat introduction. That's really helped. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Kate said, I'm Rebecca. I'm head of content at Semize. And just in case some of you aren't aware of Semize, we're a contract lifecycle management solution. We're based in Boston and also Manchester, UK, where I am joining you from this evening for myself. We've been an in-house Connect partner for many years, and it's always great to work with Kate, Shai, and the team. So we're really thankful to be here again today. So thank you. Okay, I'll jump straight in. So even though we're a CLM solution, we're not going to be focusing on CLMs today, but I'm pretty sure it will crop up in the conversation with our panelists. Instead, we're going to be talking about how you can elevate the legal role. And to do this, you'll hear from a panel of legal disruptors, 3 legal disruptors today, who will be offering their advice, their guidance, their insights on how they, and then you, can elevate the legal role as well. So before I introduce our legal disruptors, I'll just give a little bit of an overview of our agenda. So I'll first start off just by explaining what we mean by legal disruption, what this means to us, and what we mean when we mean our legal disruptors as well, and how we're elevating the legal role. We're then going to spend most of the webinar going through 4 key lessons or 4 key principles you can say about how to elevate the legal role. And we'll hear from the 3 panelists on their advice, their insights in all 4 of these areas. And then, just as Kate said, we'll go through an audience Q&A at the end. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can. So just as Kate said, keep the chat alive. I can see it's already going up already, which is fantastic. But any questions that we don't manage to answer, I will send around to our panelists after the webinar, and then we'll circulate around to everybody via email as well. So there's plenty of chance to get your questions answered. Okay, so let's get going. So firstly, I just want to give you a brief introduction of what we mean by legal disruption. So at the start of 2025, we surveyed over 250 in-house legal professionals, mainly based in the US, but it was a global survey. We were asking them all sorts of questions on how the legal role is evolving, where they see the evolution, the opportunities they're facing, but more importantly, the challenges and the pressures they're facing as well. From the results, 3 key challenges or 3 key themes stood out. The first one needing to be the need to evolve the legal role while still doing the day job. So within our survey respondents, it was really clear that the role is evolving. It's completely changing pace, it's changing tact, but legal teams still have to do the day job essentially every day. They've still got to negotiate those NDAs. They've still got to reactively look at a lot of contracts, a lot of risk, but also doing that extra role as well that they're expected to do. Secondly, there was a huge pressure to become more involved in business strategy. And we saw in our results, this kind of came from 2 angles. The firstly was that legal need to be seen as value-added drivers in the business. They don't want to be seen as a cost center or a bottleneck. So legal teams are feeling that pressure to make sure they're being heard and being shown. And the second part of this was that at the end of the day, we know that lawyers, legal teams, legal professionals, they didn't go to law school just to do that manual routine work. They want to do that value added work. They want to drive revenue. They want to have a seat at the table, essentially. So there's a lot of pressures about how to do this well exactly while still doing the day job again. And then thirdly, just like any profession, any industry, there's a need to transform processes, automate with tech, introduce AI. We're all essentially having to do more with less, often with fewer budgets, fewer headcounts. So legal teams are really feeling the pressure in that area as well. So in our original report, which we will send out after this webinar as well, we commented on these challenges and we spoke about them, but we wanted to do more. So since the start of the year, we've been speaking to what we're calling, or who we're calling, legal disruptors. These are legal professionals, all with in-house experience. Some of them still work in-house, some are consultants, set their own businesses, and basically how they have elevated the legal role. So how they have disrupted, how they have got rid of the bottleneck cost center stereotype and really showing value in their business. So we've been speaking to them to hear their advice. And this is who you will hear from today, or three of them, should I say. So I'm going to pass over to our disruptors just to give a small introduction to yourself. So Sarah, if I could start with you, please.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Rebecca. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining. My name is Sarah Irwin. I am a former SaaS general counsel turned entrepreneur and community builder and consultant for in-house legal teams globally. I'm based in Ireland, where the tech company that I used to work for was founded. Tynes is the name of the tech company. It's Ireland's latest unicorn. So I was first legal hire there. After they did a Series B raise, I built the legal function from scratch, leveraged very modern strategies to do that, leveraged all of that in turn to elevate myself within and outside the business. So I'm really excited to be here this evening and chat to you all a little bit about that. And thanks so much for coming.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Giovanna, if I could pass over to yourself, please.
Thanks, Rebecca. My name is Giovanna O'Malley. I'm also coming to you from Ireland, the west of Ireland. I am the founder of my own consultant group. I am not counsel, quite the opposite in terms of experience and basically getting to where I'm at because of chief legal officers and counsels throughout my career, allowing me to grow and enable myself to learn and grow within my role, more so within contracts, the logistics sector, quite a few pieces as well in software as well. But it's great to be joining all of you today and taking a different set of eyes from more of a non-counsel professional versus counsel. So thank you for joining.
Thank you, Giovanna. And finally, but not least, Carly.
Hello, I'm Carly Duvall Riche. I'm joining you from the United States, specifically in Kansas City. I'm an attorney with about 15 years of experience, most of that with technology companies. I'm currently the general counsel of Caraloop. We are a SaaS-based company that builds caregiving support for working families. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Thank you, Carly. As you can hear from all of our legal disruptors, there's a wealth of experience here from a range of companies, countries, backgrounds, which is great. So showing that there's not just one way to disrupt the legal role. There are many ways and many ways to do it positively. With the topics then. So when we've spoken to our legal disruptors, such as Carly, Giovanna, and Carly, but also many other disruptors as well, there's four key lessons or four key principles that really came out of the conversations on how best to elevate the role, not just in 2025, but beyond for many years as well. So I will go through just the four pieces in brief. So the first one is about strengthening your business acumen. That's all being about more strategic within the business, really getting part of that business knowledge. Secondly, it's how to build cross-department relationships, creating a strong personal brand. And then finally, using tech and AI as your trusted partner. Of course, there were many other pieces of advice that our disruptors shared, not just three panelists in today's webinar, but from all the conversations and interviews that we've had. But these four themes really came out and they were quite consistent across all the conversations. So this is what we've shaped our webinar on today. And so we're going to go through each of these four principles in detail. Got a range of questions to ask our panelists. Okay, so the first one we're going to go through is about strengthening your business acumen. As I said, this was a key piece of advice from many of our legal disruptors on how they can use legal knowledge as part of the wider business strategy, how they can get legal a seat at the table at the end of the day. So I'll start off by chatting to our disruptors. So Giovanna, if I'm okay to start with yourself. Within your legal disruptors interview specifically, you advise that legal should build quite a close bond with the business from the start. Can you talk me through the importance of this and what lawyers or legal professionals can do to get started in this area?
Absolutely. Great question, Rebecca, and thank you. For me, the importance of building a strong, cohesive bond with various business departments and leaders starts on the approach of knowing what rules of engagement they may have. Because within, as we all know, within legal departments, we each have our own set of, as I call it, either a playbook or rules of engagement. For me, it's learning what other departments have, and if they don't, helping them to establish them. The reason being is the more you know up front, the more effective you are going to be in any task that they ask you. It might be more work essentially up front, but down the road it will prove more efficient and will prove to be a more streamlined process. And quite frankly, the other thing in building that strong bond with other business leaders and departments is there's a really bad stereotype, I should say, that kind of followed me everywhere throughout my corporate challenges. I'll call them creative challenges. And that was the stereotype that legal can be a blocker. And that was exactly what I wanted not to be. So when I built these relationships with the business leaders and departments, it was understanding, how can I not block their requests, right? How can we get through this? How can we make it creative, create the language, get creative around it in order to establish what they need, but also what legal needs to remain within our rules of engagement. And quite frankly, nobody wants to be talked to or talked at. So my other rule, I should say, was always be a great listener, keep your ears open, ask the questions, and really try to stay engaged with them. It's important that you all remain a cohesive department.
Absolutely. I think legal being seen as a blocker is definitely a narrative that many legal teams have heard. Callie or Sarah, I don't know if you can add on to that as well, if you've had experience in the past where yourself or a legal team that you first came into a company as was seen as a blocker and how you managed to overcome that.
Absolutely. I can jump in. I echo what Giovanna said very much. I try very hard not to make legal a blocker where I work. And one of the ways that I've approached that is to figure out what is the overarching goal or the principle for legal in your organization. I'm at a small startup company. We're SaaS based. Right now, we are trying to get to revenue as fast as possible, and we're trying to increase revenue as fast as possible. If you're at a public company with a legal department of 500 people, maybe that's not your goal, but that is what my goal is. So knowing that, I know that I need to get to yes as fast as possible. And redlining every single comma in an agreement, holding firm on particular phrasing and language and contracts and things like that's not going to get us there. So if that's what I'm doing in the legal department, I'm not aligned with my company's goals. I'm not going to have great success in my company because I'm also being measured by my overarching company's goals. So you have to know that and then know where your legal team fits into that.
Absolutely.
And I echo that. My last job as GC, I was working at a SaaS scale up, and my number one from day one, my biggest priority was to ensure the legal team was fully aligned with company goals, which were invariably revenue generating related. And then also its values, speed, simplicity were two of the company values. And in order to, they obviously both come in very handy when you're trying to work fast and generate that revenue. So that really helps. It helps the wider business to also see that you're swimming in the same direction as them, even if they don't really understand what legal does or what you're there to do. They can see that in your little micro actions that are fully aligned with top line company goals, that you're on the same team, and that just subliminally positions you as a much sort of better liked function.
Absolutely. So I think I could expand on that as well. So as a consultant, you help in-house teams overcome that blocker narrative and help them align on goals. What are some of the kind of easy first steps they can take when you first start speaking to a potential client and they've got this narrative in front of them?
Yeah, so you'd be surprised the number that I talk to that actually don't know what the company goals are, whether you're working at a tech scale up or a heavily regulated entity or a listed company. They just don't know what is being discussed in the board and executive level. So that is a really important number one step. The other thing that I get them to do is to think about operationalizing their legal practice. We talk all the time about to try not to be siloed and so on and so forth. I like to talk about it more along the lines of adopting a product team mindset. So the product team are obsessed with what, the customer experience is and making that simpler and more accessible. Traditionally, in-house lawyers would hang around and wait to be instructed or handle each request individually rather than, say, just carving out a little bit of time to identify what's broken and recurring patterns that need to be fixed and stuff like that. So that is a big piece of work that I also do with my clients that I did myself when I was first Eagle Hire in GC. Yeah, so these are really modern ways of working. These aren't ways that we were working 20 years ago. In-house lawyers were really just hired to manage risk. So those are really important foundational and optic priorities that involve some quick wins, longer term strategies. So those are the kind of things that I get in-house lawyers to think about when I work with them.
Yeah, I think it's definitely saying taking that more proactive rather than reactive approach, which can be a complete change in mindset, but sometimes it's just those kind of small steps that can get them started and get them thinking down that path, which is good.
Yeah, and like Carly, this will resonate with Carly as well. When you work at a scale up and you are constantly building stuff and everyone's building things around you, it's quite nice because you get used to iterating and improving bit by bit, day by day, because there's a lot more focus and celebration of the journey and building rather than the sort of end goal. Yeah, so it's quite a nice playground for doing that.
Absolutely. And Carly, I kind of want to touch on that with yourself as well. So you talked about having those kind of shared goals and being proactive. And one thing that you really mentioned in your Legal Disruptors interview was being a generalist. So again, thinking about those shared goals, thinking about different departments. When you say generalist and working with different departments, what is your advice for legal teams who want to go down that path as well? Where can they get started?
So I'll give two pieces of advice. Most of the people in this audience are probably in-house counsel. They're already in an in-house role, but I'll start first with if there's anybody joining us that you're here because that's where you want to get, right? You're still in private practice. You're not quite in the in-house role. I would focus on, to the extent that you can, getting experience in a lot of different areas, getting experience, not siloing yourself so that you're like the foremost expert on some very small provision of the tax code. That generally isn't going to set you up as well for a broad-based kind of general counsel career. And when I'm talking to in-house counsel, as I expect a lot of the people on this webinar are, you're already in-house, but maybe you've not elevated yourself to the general counsel role. Maybe you're still in a support place and you're like, hey, I want to get broader. I want to learn more about it. I would learn all parts of the business that you work in your company. And some of our other panelists have already touched on this. And so the way that you do that is get curious, approach with genuine curiosity. Don't just be reactive, as we've heard about a little bit today, where you're like, this is my task today and this is what I must do. And so I'm going to get this task done and I'm going to move on. But instead, approach the department or the different leader in a different area of the company and say, hey, before I dig into this, can I ask you some questions? What are your goals? What is your timeline? What are you trying to achieve? What haven't I asked that you think would be helpful for me to know? And if you do that over and over again with different people in your company, different people in your organization, over time, you're going to learn a lot more than just the contracts and the forms and the processes that exist within your own legal department.
Yeah, and what you actually find when you do that, when you go to finance and ask them a question, maybe about payment terms in a contract or an order form, when you go to the security team to talk to them about something cybersecurity, security related, and so on, people love talking about what they do. They're so proud of their function and their work. So there's almost a little bit of almost pandering to the ego or something, but that's not really what you're doing. But you're like, just be inquisitive and care about what they do. But they love talking about what they do. In my experience, I found it's quite sweet to watch, but it does help. And obviously not everyone's work is contract related. But one thing I found super helpful was, say I got a big long 300-page MSA in, passing the different bits out to different functions across the business whose input I needed. And then if you had the time, if it wasn't an urgent, big, long mega contract, that was quite a good excuse to then build relationships cross-functionally and get finance to talk to you for 15 minutes about payment terms, stuff like that, because people they are proud of their work and expertise and they love talking about it.
I couldn't agree more. Actually, to chime in there as well, by doing all that, it creates a trust and a bond that no contract per se can take that, right? That trust and bond is gold to me. And quite frankly, even before you parcel out, say, the different sections of a contract, if you do have time in that 300-page MSA, I'll always say to colleagues and peers, take a crack at it, do a little bit of research, try and help them. Let's help them be better as well, because I know they're inundated. They might be short a person in their department. So the more we can help, I do feel like the stronger the bond develops then.
Absolutely. I think this actually really segues perfect into our next topic, which is about building cross-department relationships, which all three of you have just touched upon or gone into detail about there. And this is another the second key theme that came out of a lot of our interviews, that if you can't build those cross-department relationships, you're not going to elevate the legal role. Talking about building those cross-department relationships, as I said, you've already touched on this already, but I think we can go even a little bit further on this. I think a lot of this is building a lot of relationships with sales, and I've heard this from many legal teams, not just disruptors, but customized potential clients, customers that join us, that often can be legal versus sales, that sales see legal as the bottleneck. And we know that doesn't have to be the case. I think you three panelists have definitely proven that within your businesses and within your consultancy work. I think I'll start with yourself. So you have already touched on this, but once you're getting to know the business, or maybe you're just starting out getting to know the business, how else can you build successful internal relationships outside of legal? What kind of tips and advice would you offer to maybe someone that's just joined your team?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, it's built on honesty. You're not going to have any kind of successful relationship or any long-term relationship unless it is built on honesty. And so I think when everybody gets along and everybody's happy and everything's going great and you're helping somebody solve a problem, that's really easy to identify it. And it's a lot harder when conflict comes up. And in a legal role, often there is conflict. You're telling somebody no, even if you're trying really hard not to be the blocker, that may be what you ultimately have, the role you have to play. And so when conflict comes up, I'm pretty direct. I go to the other leader and I say, hey, I know you don't like it. I know you don't like this. I know you're against me on this. I know that we don't agree. I know that. You start right there. I'm being honest. I'm not going behind your back. I'm not trying to manipulate you into saying yes to me. I'm not trying to trick you or anything like that. I'm pretty forthright and honest. And I start with that. I know you're against me on this, but I also know that we both care about getting this contract to yes. So let's talk about it. Let's talk through it. And then I find the common ground and work from there. And I have great internal relationships, even with the organizations that you might think are in friction with legal a lot, because that's the way we approach it. And I don't think it would have been as successful if I just tried to overrun them or go behind their back to accomplish what I thought was necessary.
Absolutely. And Giovanna, you mentioned honesty in the last discussion there. I don't know if you want to touch upon that. And also, you've mentioned a lot how you've worked so successfully with the sales team. Is it built on that place of honesty, or are there other areas that it was built upon as well?
Oh my gosh, Carly and Rebecca, 1000%. Honesty, transparency. I always say transparency is key, especially with your sales. We don't expect the sales or the field to negotiate a liability section in the contract. The very same goes for they shouldn't expect us to negotiate current rates in ocean cargo per se. We wouldn't know that. So for me, it's both sides remaining transparent in order to gain the trust as well as move the contract forward. From my personal experience, and especially during COVID, I had the absolute pleasure in working with a phenomenal chief of sales officer who probably was my biggest cheerleader in life. And he allowed me to host webinars, mini workshops, basically anybody from the field and sales that had any questions. Things weren't going their way because COVID was such a disruptor, right? And so we would set up sometimes weekly, but more so monthly. I would send out gain all the topics or all the questions first, do a quick review of them, sum them down to 5, because obviously 25 questions in a 1 hour wasn't going to suffice. But most important was that they wanted to hear from me because I was willing to understand what problems they were facing on the ground. As I say, boots on the ground. I'm not on the ground. I'm the background. So how can I help them and be better at their role with feeding them information that might be in a contract so that they can understand up front and realize, ooh, what Geo told me limits of liability, we want to keep it below 5,000, or something that would ring a bell with them. And I'd often bring up acronyms and whatnot. So to me, it's all about we teach to enable so we can grow to accomplish together as a team. But all that is founded on transparency and honesty.
Mm-hmm. I think you said two key things there as well. Firstly, you understood their goals, what they were coming from, but also that your chief sales officer almost became your key influencer, your key advocate within that. And I think that's really key, and something that came out again in many of our interviews was that find your influencers outside of legal, people that will be on your side, people that understand your goals and what you're trying to do for their goals is definitely key. Sarah, can you touch upon this? Who were your key influencers within your previous in-house roles or that you see for your clients now?
Yeah, I was so lucky. I had a great VP of sales, especially for North America, which was the biggest market that the company I worked at operated in. And just to Joe's point about trust building, I cared so much about and understanding their goals. I cared so much about those that I used to travel to Boston to our American headquarters at the end of every quarter to sit with the sales team and coach them and guide them and get to know the human beings behind the Slack pings. And there are lots of different ways that you can do that. But yeah, key influencers, definitely that VP of sales. I was very lucky that he was as invested in minimizing and removing friction as I was. Yeah, so very lucky.
I was wondering as well if any of you find it important that you understood sales language or sales team's goals, if this is something that came out of our conversations, and if you find that is the case, how can legal teams get started with that as sometimes breaking down those barriers? And as you said, Gio, booking in an hours meeting once a month was even maybe too much for your chief sales officer. How do you first break that ground?
I think this comes back to understanding company goals. And if you're working at a scaling tech company, they will invariably be revenue related. And you can log into Salesforce or your CRM and see all the deals that are in motion, join forecast calls, get a sense of what deals are actually committed, likely to close, and what you shouldn't be looking at. Yeah, but there are really helpful ways that you can, and that also helps legal embed them yourself across the business as well and show an interest in what they're doing. Yeah, that would be my top tip.
Yeah, I'll add to that. From a broad perspective, you should know how your business makes money and what costs its money. Sarah and I come from a tech background. It's general subscription. It's usually going to be like a subscription base. If you're in a company that makes and sells widgets, what widgets sell the best and how do you sell your widgets the faster? Are there middlemen or brokers involved in your sales process? All of that. As a legal person, you should know all of that and you should know what levers to pull and not pull and how they impact the value of the deal. And I would say for your sales team, take that one step further, know how your sales team makes money. So do they make more money on a 3-year deal or a 1-year deal? If it's a 3-year deal, you best not be in the room negotiating down the length of the term of the agreement because your salesperson, that's literally money out of their pocket. And don't do that without understanding that and making sure that you have their consent or okay to do that. So those kinds of things, are there escalators that they get for pay or incentives or promotion or whatever it is in your company? You should know that before you go in to negotiate commercial terms if that's what's on your plate. And going back to what we said earlier, you get there by being curious, asking questions. And then Sarah brought up some really great ways that you can do it structurally by setting forth regular recurrent times to touch point and touch base with that team so you're getting that information.
I'm also seeing,
Absolutely.
sorry, Rebecca, I was just going to
No, go
say,
ahead.
I muscled in on the sales kickoff, the annual sales kickoff, which traditionally was just for sales and go-to-market team. Now getting a bit of a rebrand, right? It's just a company kickoff because we're living in the age of NDR and client retention, and companies are realizing that it's not all about sales anymore. It's about marketing and product and customer success and so on. But if you can muscle in on things, because there might be resistance to you, the sales team might wonder why on earth you're even interested in how they make money, but just remember that is a really helpful way to feed into your goals and work. But yeah, one thing I did was just join the sales kickoff event. It was fantastic. And I sat there and I thought, I can't believe other in-house lawyers don't go to these things and have access to how the sales team is strategizing for the rest of the year and what they're prioritizing. And yeah, so that's a helpful one as well.
This came out of one of our other interviews as well. One of our disruptors said that she would often make sure she had a full speaking slot at sales conferences and sometimes do launch parties for legal tech products or legal tech implementations they've had, just to make sure that legal were always part of that conversation and part of the exciting things as well, which actually leads wonderfully into our next principle, which is all about creating a strong personal brand. So this is the third principle on how to elevate the legal role. And this may sound like a bit of a strange one about creating a strong personal brand, but essentially it's how to reshape legal's brand in a company. And our three panelists here have already spoken about that and given some tips on how to do that, but then reshaping it from that bottleneck stereotype, that cost center blocker stereotype, into the strategic role that legal should be portrayed as. So I think we can definitely start on this. And Sarah, I think you're a great person to start on this. So you've created your own legal consultancy. You really stand for good branding. I see you on LinkedIn at events all the time, so you're definitely doing something right. So how do you personally lean into your own personal brand, your legal brand? And did you have the same tips and principles for when you worked in-house as well?
Yeah, this is a great question, Rebecca. Well done. Personal brand is a very overused modern term that really just means reputation, right? So
Yeah.
how do you want to be seen? What do you stand for? How do you not want to be seen as well? You really want to think about that and think about how you're seen in the minds of your customers. And when you're working in-house, your customers are your colleagues, really, and especially sales team, like Carly and I experience, like often sales is your biggest client, right? And you need to think about very carefully how you structure that. Another big tip I would give is about self-advocacy, right? So in an ideal world, your work speaks for itself. Okay. So in an ideal world, everyone across the planet knows what I do and my consulting work, community building, and so on. But they don't. I need to speak up about that and share what I do and share how I do it and what I stand for and so on. So that really is the same regardless of what it is that you're trying to sell or attract. And there are big parallels between building a personal brand when you're in-house, internally and externally. Obviously, obvious things in terms of external personal brand building, like writing blogs, speaking at things, thought leadership content on LinkedIn, all the stuff that I do. The personal brand building internally will follow if you do all the stuff that we're talking about and the hard work that you do in aligning with company goals, building a self-service culture, really obviously caring about the experience of the people that come and want to engage with legal. All of that is brand building. You're brand building yourself into a business enabler, strong business partners to the business and away from siloed and hated. And then simple things like at your all hands or your company meetings, team meetings, volunteer to talk about something, pick a project you think the business will be vaguely interested in and talk about that for 15 minutes or even 5 minutes. So there are lots of different ways you can do it, but the very short answer is no. There's very little difference between how I personal brand build now compared to how I did it when I was in-house.
Yeah, so all about building that kind of PR, as you say, and that there are many different ways to do this. And I think what really came out of our interviews was that there's no one way to do this. There's no kind of one legal person, one legal brand. People can do it in a way that works for them. And I think that's a good question to ask yourself as you've also created your own company. So how do you lean into your personal brand? What's important and what advice do you have for legal teams that need to elevate that brand a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. When I worked in-house as the director of legal, I treated not only the department, but the company as my own. So every morning walking into my office and knowing that I had over 500 employees looking at any given time across the globe for direction and guidance, that was to me like such an honor and a pleasure, right? It is something to this day I never took for granted. I will never take for granted. So for me, personal branding is based upon whether it be in a corporation, your own company, if you're an athlete, always treat it that it's your own. right? The more you care, the more you're going to get out of it. The more you give people your time, your patience, you're learning to, and willing to train them, as vice versa. As I always said to some of my colleagues and peers, don't ever forget, we all might be burned out at the end of the day, but knowledge is power and nobody can take that away. So if you take that forward, even if you lost everything else, you take your brand, you take your reputation, and you take your knowledge, you're set. You can create and recreate on your own time and time again.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Callie, is someone who still works in-house for a loop. Do those principles kind of align with you, or is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I'm going to take a kind of step back and say, what is a personal brand? What is your reputation? To me, that's what people say about you when you're not in the room. And so if you're thinking about your internal teams, if we're thinking about the sales team that like Sarah mentioned when you're working, what do you want your salespeople to say about their legal counsel? Do you want them to say, ugh, legal, they're never going to say yes to this and gear up for a fight? Or do you want them to say, oh, this is a really gnarly issue and I don't know the answer to it. Who's going to help me? Giovanna. Who's a great resource here? Sarah, or whatever it may be. So first of all, that's what you're going for. What I see for in-house counsel consistently is that they say they want their personal brand to be one thing and they are not consistently showing up matching that. For example, my personal brand, it matters very much to me for my internal teams that they see me as dependable and trustworthy. That means that I have to consistently deliver on time and, like we've talked about so many times, be honest. And what I see a lot of in-house counsel do is they say, I want to be seen as dependable and trustworthy. And then they're consistently harried, disorganized, behind schedule, and not on the company's timetable. Guess what? You're not showing, you don't look dependable there. You look like a person who doesn't have a handle on the things that they're responsible for. Whatever is your personal brand, and it may vary at different points in your career, it may vary at different companies that you're at. Think about what it is, and then ask yourself, what are 5 ways that I can consistently show up and demonstrate this brand? And then hopefully that follows you such that when you're not in the room, that's what people say about you.
Absolutely. I think a lot of that kind of relays back, as you said, that trust, honesty, and then leaning into what your teams need, listening to them, depending on them, and then following through and doing what you say. I think all of these points so far will really resonate with a lot of the people in the audience today, a lot of people listening to your advice. One thing that I'm for in is that this also can sound like a lot. It's a lot to do, of course, a lot to do while still doing the day job. And I think this is what a lot of legal teams are still feeling the pressure on. So I'm going to segue into the next section of using tech and AI, which some people may think as a lifeline, and that's what we're going to discuss today, how tech and AI can be a lifeline. It can help you do all of these things we've discussed. It can help you build that PR. It can help you be a bit more honest. It can help you collaborate better. But sometimes it's just getting started, which can be the hard bit, and doing all of this at once is the difficulty. So I'd love to spend a bit of time in this area just thinking about how tech and AI can really be used as a trusted partner and not just used day to day. So, Carla, just going back to what you were speaking on there again about working with those teams, delivering, seeing the results, sticking to the deadlines that you promised. How can tech and AI help you or enhance that even further so that you do show up for the rest of your team?
Yeah, so I'm at a small company and a small legal department. And so I use AI. I'll use AI in the traditional generative terms, the chat GPT type function, the more broad as opposed to like legal focused solutions. I use that. I use AI like I would if I had a senior associate level attorney on my team. So I think of AI as a tool that's great at brainstorming, great at summarizing information for me. And then at the end of the day, as the general counsel, I'm still the final decision maker. So I'm not outsourcing. I'm thinking of it as an extension of my team, and that's how I use it. It frees me up to be more proactive and strategic. Another way that I use that kind of AI or tech tool or function is to do what I like to say, farm dissent. So I might put in a paragraph I've drafted for a contract, or I might put in a policy I've drafted for the company or something, and I say, what have I overlooked? What am I missing here? What's a blind spot I have? I ask it that all the time. What's a blind spot I have here? And so I use it that way. And that circles back to so many of the things that we've talked about already about building internal relationships. If I'm using that tool to already pinpoint areas of dissent or things that I might not have thought of. Hopefully that lets me go into an internal discussion with another team member in another department where I've already prepped that. I've already thought through that. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to talk through them, and I'm utilizing our time together more efficiently.
You're really touching on what Sarah said previously about reshaping your mindset in a proactive way. You're proactively going into some of those contracts or those redrafts rather than waiting for something to happen, then reacting to it. You're using AI to facilitate that, which is fantastic. Sarah, I'll then jump to you to talk about AI and tech, and how are you helping legal teams within your role as a consultant use tech and AI, just like Carly's mentioned, to be more proactive, to improve collaboration, to facilitate more work?
Yeah, so again, it's a mix between quick wins and then getting them to focus their minds on longer term gains. Most people, I'm encouraging people to buy a legal AI tool rather than necessarily using Chat GPT for research and updates and so on, because they all are already pre-programmed to think like a lawyer. And then integrations. So the best tools, including Surmise, have terrific integrations. And what we're seeing now, thanks to AI, is the rise of point solutions where the AI is meeting lawyers where they already work and where business engages with legal. Obviously, that all assumes that you're ready to buy, you have the processes in place and the people internally, the team, the human beings to oversee that. But there's been a huge increase in the improvement around integrations. We're all learning what those are. If I had AI now, I would have immediately applied it to Slack. Just to have a co-pilot in there answering repetitive, boring, burnout questions. What's our company address? Who signs this? Who signs that? But yeah, it's fantastic. It really is. It's awesome. And it's great to see.
Sarah, talking about those points, especially integrations and the nice mention, always worth it, of course. And I want to just go on to you to talk about this as well. So Sarah spoke about using legal tech and AI to help collaboration, meeting teams where they're already working. So not getting your sales team or your procurement team to use another tool to help legal. How have you found that area, or how are you helping your clients improve internal collaboration with tools?
A win for Surmise. I have onboarded now Surmise with 2 of my clients. To be quite frank with you, the system is brilliant as long as I would say you have to have your background and your information already done and established, right? You can't just you can't have a software tool and expect it to fix everything without putting your homework or your due diligence into it first. For instance, you want to have your rules of engagement, your playbook done first, right? That software is only going to be successful if you give it successful information and you take the time to learn it. I think that's a huge fault in a lot of companies is they just don't take the time to onboard it successfully and understand all the workings it actually has. With that said, though, I would say that with ChatGPT, I actually don't like that feature. And the only reason being is that because I'm not counsel, I do have a lot of clients that'll come to me and say, I drafted my own contract, and I will see it. And it looks like a bird wrote the contract. and I will do some further research, and it is out of just a simple chat function. So I guess my suggestion to them is don't use it as a primary, use it as a backup, exhaust all other avenues. I would say go on to even looking at examples of worst case scenarios and get creative, draft your own language first, and then use it to compare, like Carly said, use it to compare to fill those voids. Don't go there initially. And last but not least, with one of the tools with Surmise, which is phenomenal, is that when you do have your playbook set, right, you've done your homework, the legal department has it, it's set. It's embedded into the system. When a contract comes through, that AI is already pulling the language that you would automatically redline and redlining it according to your playbook. So you are saving so much time there. You still need legal professionals' eyes on it to make sure that everything is tied out with a nice bow, but you're saving so much time. You're not turning those pages. You're not pouring over stuff. AI is a great tool, but again, it's an assistant. It's not the primary.
Yeah, I think that's key as well, that maybe not just legal teams, but many professions, they implement tools and they expect it to do everything from day one. But if that was the case, there'd be no need for our jobs. So I think that's almost a saving grace as well, because there are many fears that AI or tech could replace jobs, replace lawyers. But what we're seeing is that it's definitely getting rid of the manual tasks, that routine work that you don't want to be spending your time on anyway, and then leaving you to do that strategic work that you trained all those years to do Is that what all of you are finding within these tools? Is actually allowing you to do more of that thinking that you do want to do?
Absolutely, 100%. And earlier in the chat, I think it was Lori that asked something about how can I like shift some more work onto the non-legal teams? Like basically, how can I make my business teams be doing a little bit more before they come to legal? Or how can I help them help me execute on these things? And I think that this is a great way for that tech tools, AI tools like Surmise, really other robust CLMs can really help you in that it can, like Giovanna was saying, you put in the playbooks, the expectations, you put in the guardrails, and it can do so much of it so that the routine stuff is all taken out. It's all shifted to other people. It frees it up. It makes it get to done faster for you. And then whether that means that you're a volume place where, you know, there's another contract sitting right behind it, but you're getting through them faster, it could certainly be that. Or it could be that that frees you up to do whatever it is that you're not finding time to do. Maybe it's getting more involved on a strategic level. There's been some people in the chat that have talked about, say, that have said, hey, my ultimate goal in my organization is actually to be a leader of a business unit. How do I get there? If you've routinized some of the everyday functions that you've had and outsourced them to technology, perhaps that gives you the space to seek out a mentor in an area that you want to grow into, that you want to go to. Right now, you're looking around and saying, when would I find space to do that? I would try to slough off this everyday, day-to-day operational things to open you up to more in your role.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carly. Sarah, Giovanna, anything to add there before I run into our summaries? I appreciate now we're running almost out of time with so many great insights.
Yeah, just one thing. I leveraged, I was very focused on building the legal function in a way that aligned with the principles of legal operations. I bought legal tech before the explosion of generative AI, and I very much leveraged that as a product, as a project to show the entire business that I was a modern leader, and it got me greater respect. It built my reputation as being tech forward and business minded, and obviously helped that I worked at a tech company and they cared about that sort of thing. But not everyone here is a GC, not everyone here has the authority to buy a legal tech tool and implement it. But you don't have to do that. If you own, say you spot something that's broken, especially if you're new to a company, you have that sort of objectivity. You might see something that isn't working quite that well and offer a better way of doing it, and try that, spend 2 or 4 weeks working on that, and then show the results after. Those things are positioning you as thinking strategically, which will help you elevate faster. Do I need to stop talking now? We're doing a poll.
No, we're
we've all
just
got
doing
so
it
much
as
great
we
advice.
wrap up. Don't worry, you don't have to stop talking. Please
Oh.
continue. We have space built in past the top of the hour as well for questions and everything. So nobody cut yourselves off. I'm just trying to be efficient.
Yeah, so I suppose the TLDR is you don't always have to pick something incredibly huge and time consuming, or do an MBA or a new course or get some new qualifications to elevate. Sometimes it's actually as simple as experimenting with a month long or quarter long project where you're improving the operations and running service delivery of the legal team, especially if it's in a way that aligns with the wider business aims, because all of that is helping you elevate. Yeah, I will stop talking now. I'm finished.
It was a really good end sentence though, Sarah, so well done. How to elevate the legal role. Thank you so much. Okay, we will go on to the Q&A now because I can see there's a lot of good questions in the chat. Hand over to you to fire away.
Yeah, I think you actually have been addressing a ton of them as we've gone along. So I don't see any that you all haven't already responded to, I don't think. But if anyone has other questions, please pop them in the chat. We can hang around for another several minutes and answer any questions folks might have for our amazing panelists who have given us so much fantastic information today. While we wait for questions to roll, and I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to be here with us and sharing your knowledge. I think that this was really informative. Ooh, there we go. Do you have any advice regarding time reporting and how to find the right approach to showing the results?
I can jump in here. I do use a tool that helps me keep track of requests that are coming into legal. It's the primary, that was the primary focus of it, but a result of it is it gives you data and then you can report on it. And I know obviously various CLMs, including will give you really similar information. And so start there. So you got to have data, right? And nobody wants to manually be creating that. So find out where your data is and how you get it. And my tool, my reporting to my board and my management is pretty straightforward. I tell them how fast the types of requests that are coming in, how many, when they're coming in, and how fast we're responding to them. Those kind of 4 data points is all they really want. So I would say first find out where your data is, how you can get it. And then the second part of it is to know what they want to see, because what you care to see may not be what your management team, whether that's a board or an executive function, would care to see. So find out those 2 things. And then I think it was Giovanna earlier said, be your own advocate, or maybe it was Sarah, but do that, be your own advocate. So report in a way that advocates for you and your team and the work that you're doing.
Yeah, and we actually didn't talk about data generally, and being data driven, it's the love language of modern business, right? And quite often you find yourselves working in a company where they don't want to read words, and writing words just aren't the best way for them to process what you're trying to communicate. If you're trying to show how fast you're moving, or whatever your sort of metrics are, data is the best way to do that, and it's the way that also in doing that, it will invariably position you as a strong business leader, because you are literally speaking the language of everyone else at the company, especially finance, especially if you're trying to get more budget. But yeah, being data driven is a great way to show any results of any metrics that you're being, I was going to say judged on, measured by.
Totally agree, Sarah. And actually, in terms of the finance as well, adding a little bit more to that, even if you have to track it manually in an Excel sheet, get that data, prove your points, bring it to finance in order for them to approve the software. But until they have that data, that won't be approved. But again, it is worth tracking. It absolutely is worth tracking, because I do feel like sometimes in-house legal positions that any one department doesn't realize the amount legal is being dumped on, and they don't know that every department thinks that their project, their review takes priority and precedent, and they might not be speaking to each other. So if it's all presented, even if it's on a simple Excel sheet, it does, I guess, bring more attention to the fact of how much you are taking in on a daily basis and what is expected and what kind of product they expect out. Is it the 100% ruling, or is it the 80-20? You've got to go fast. It's 80-20, get it out the door. We need these wins. Again, I'm not against the old fashioned Excel, but I do agree with Carly that software would be the better option.
It's all very good advice, especially just, yeah, I think having a firm grip on what the person receiving the data is expecting out of the data, expecting to learn from the data, is so crucial, because you can put something together that makes sense in your brain and makes sense to you and this is what I would want to see. And then they come back and you're like, great, I have to redo this whole thing. So all very good advice. All right. Barring any other last minute questions, I think we can wrap up here. Thank you so much, Rebecca, Carly, Giovanna, and Sarah. You provided so much fantastic insight. I think this was really helpful. We had lots of people commiserating about all of these issues in the chat as well, and some great compliments already that this was a great presentation. So we really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us and be here. And thank you to all of you for attending as well. We appreciate you spending the time with us. Panelists, any last words, any last tips, tricks, advice? No, they've given us all their knowledge.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you,
absolutely.
ladies. A real
Yeah,
pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you again to Semize for sponsoring this so that it was free for all of you. And we will hopefully see you on the next one. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You.
Bye.
Bye.